is Robbie Nayu from the Localization Fireside Chat. And welcome to another. Today, we're doing two things. We're broadcasting live on LinkedIn. And thanks for all the LinkedIn community for watching us. At the same time, we're recording an episode here. I think we're in the 230, 231 episodes now. And today's guest, we are doing a do-over kind of a podcast today with my guest, Cynthia Dearin from Australia, where it's right now for her 8 a.m. in the morning. And I want to thank you, Cynthia, for joining me early in the morning, your time. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me on the show. And I'm really excited that we could broadcast live as well.
Absolutely. And you know what? I want to thank you also for being such a good sport and taking on the conversation again. I really appreciate that and trying it over again. And for the audience, you know, a lot of times when we're doing these podcasts, we're doing them online, obviously. There's many pieces to the puzzle. There's connections, there's software, there's laptops, there's a bunch of things, and they all have to work perfectly. And if they don't, then we'll have to do a do-over. This is one of them. At least I get a chance to see Cynthia again and say hello and chat with her again. For the audience, I just want to make sure that first we welcome Cynthia to the conversation. Cynthia's is a crossroad of international strategy. So she works a lot with small to medium businesses on international growth or growth in general, their business growth in general. And she generally works in emerging markets. And she also wrote two books. One is called Camels, Sheikhs, and Billionaires. And I leafed through this one, Cynthia. It's pretty interesting, fascinating. And also another book called Business Beyond Borders. I'm not sure if you published any other books since last time we spoke. I'm not sure.
Not yet. We've got a new one. I've got a new one coming out later this year when I find 5 minutes to finish drafting it. And that one is called The Global Standard, Enduring Advantage for International Business. But maybe we can talk about that later.
Yeah, the Global Standard one. I think we've touched on that one a lot last time, but we'll talk a little bit about that one. Cynthia's based in Sydney, Australia. Her firm is Dearin Associates, and she focused exclusively on mid-sized companies, not enterprise, not startups. She is a keynote speaker and author, and she has almost 140,000 followers on LinkedIn. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're speaking to a celebrity, a mover and shaker in the economy out there, and also she runs something called Business Beyond Borders podcast. She's a fellow podcaster as well. We're talking to a veteran on several angles here, and her journey becoming the international strategy specialist is great. It's great to have that international perspective for the Localization Fireside Chat because of our audience who is obviously operating in multi-countries, multi-nationalities, multi-demographics. And there's also that angle into our conversation where humanity is connecting and bridging that gap between each other's communication. And it shouldn't be any problem there because that's what we do as an industry. So Cynthia, welcome again.
Good to be here.
Absolutely. And Cynthia, since we spoke, and I don't want to sound like we were just talking about it earlier. It's been a while since last time we spoke. So I don't recall what I asked you. So it's not going to sound like I've rehearsed it. I don't want to sound like I'm duplicating the questions, and you don't want to sound like you're doing the same on your side. Take me back to the beginning, if you don't mind. How does someone end up in building a career around teaching mid-sized companies to cross borders? Where did that all start? What's your journey like?
Look, it is a great question. I mean, when I think about it, I've been interested in a couple of things. I've been interested in international stuff and business since I was a tiny girl. And I've been interested in education since I was pretty young as well. And those are all things that I find really fascinating. And I think, the business that has eventually emerged out of that is kind of a combination of those factors. But when I was little, if you'd asked me what I was going to do, I would not have told you that this was going to be it. So
what was the original dream, Cynthia, then?
I was going to be a diplomat from the time I was about 12. And, I started telling people that mostly just to get them off my case because I didn't really know what I was going to do. And I thought, well, if I tell people that, they're going to leave me alone. And it actually worked. But, these things can be a bit self-fulfilling. So when I graduated from high school, I went off to university and did a law degree and an international studies degree because I'd heard that this would help you get recruited as a graduate trainee into our foreign service here in Australia, and it turned out to be true. So I did do that, and I joined our Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade all the way back in 2001. And I was, for a period of time, a diplomat and got posted to Egypt and got posted to the UAE and Qatar. And then after a while, I switched over to the dark side and became a management consultant. But I'd spent all this time in the Middle East and been trained in Arabic by that stage, even though I thought I was going to get a French or Japanese speaking post. It didn't happen. So yeah, I went off and I worked in the Middle East, mainly in Iraq, first for the British government as a consultant, and then for USAID back in the days when that was a thing, and and the US Department of Defense, really trying to help the government in Iraq to put the economy back together again. I returned to Australia after about 12 years abroad. So by that time, I'd done France, the UK, Egypt, the United Arab Emirates and Qatar, and Iraq. And I came back to Sydney in 2010, and nobody could really figure out what to do with me here because we don't do as much, relatively speaking, with the Middle East as other parts of the world. So I ran the Australia Arab Chamber of Commerce and Industry for a few years, and then I set the business up back in 2013. And I had, at the back of my mind, sort of had this idea, yeah, I'll start a company, you know, sometime in my 30s. And then when I was like, well, what am I going to do now? I was like, oh yeah, I did say I was going to do that. So I started. But, you know, if we're honest about it, I really didn't have much clue what I was doing when I started it. So, you know, it's been a long journey of figuring it out and really figuring out what does the market want and what do people actually need, you know, not getting too hung up on my initial ideas and really finding out what do people want and then making sure that we provide that for them so we can actually solve their problems and get them generating money in markets that are not their own.
Correct. Now, I know, you know, you mentioned that you worked quite extensively in the Middle East. Is this where the first book came from, Camels, Sheikhs, and Billionaires?
Yes.
What's the background story there?
Well, look, I mean, I wrote, when I started the business was all about the Middle East because I'd just come off, 10, 12 years of my career, which had been all focused on the Middle East. You know, I was trained in Arabic by a foreign service. I was posted in Egypt. I was posted in the UAE. I went off to London and did a Master of Middle East Politics. I worked in Iraq. I was doing most of my work in Iraq. I came back to Australia, started the company. I wanted to have something to really explain what we did, but and promote the company and show that we were credible. But, you know, I also realized that people in the West have so little idea about what's actually happening in the Middle East. And most people in Australia, I think, at least, I mean, I'm going to generalize, but let me generalize and say it anyway. I kind of feel like most people think that everybody in the Middle East sleeps with an AK-47 next to their bed and like jumps out of bed, runs out of their tent with their camels and starts firing into the air.
Pretty much an accurate generalization, yes.
But it's nothing like that, right? And I'm like, no, well, you know, I've been there for 10 years. I have learned a lot and I've had my own perspective on it transform. So I really wanted to share that. And so that initial book, which probably needs a second edition at this point because the political landscape has shifted so much since I wrote it. But the cultural stuff is still, you know, for the most part, pretty accurate. But I wanted to show people that people in the Middle East are just like people everywhere else.
Yeah.
You know, like we're all human beings. Essentially, the vast majority of us want to live peacefully and raise our children and educate them and make sure that they have a good life. And it's not more difficult than that. And there are more things that actually make us similar than different.
100%.
And so that's what I was wanting to do with the book, and to really also provide a toolkit for business people operating in the Middle East about how to go about it so they could get the right results. You know, how not to blunder in there with their own set of assumptions and preferences and just blow it up and offend everybody.
100%. That's very, what I call in Canada, we call thread on, walk on thin ice with this topic. I know ice is not something for Australia, but in Canada, it's walking on thin ice.
Well, look, I'm sure there would be a ton of people who would violently disagree with me, but I also say I know a lot of the people who disagree with me have never been anywhere near the Middle East, and all that they know is
we can't get people to agree on most topics nowadays, you always have to have people who are pro,
Yeah.
for, or against, or somewhere neutral in the middle.
Well, look,
And
there's nothing like a bit of lived experience to figure out what you really think, right? Like, it's all very well to make make up your mind based on whatever you get through your news algorithm. But I think, if people really want to know anything about anything, they should go wherever the thing is and see it for themselves.
100%. And, there are, I'm from the Middle East. And,
Yeah.
when I came here to North America, I was treated very nice. I don't have any issues with anybody.
Yeah.
I don't recall anybody being, treating me differently because I'm from the Middle East. I don't recall that at all.
Yeah.
In fact, after 9/11, I remember crossing the border to go on business trip, and my friends were worried about me. They thought I was going to be thrown in jail or something. I don't know for what. I have no idea. They thought, oh my God, you can't. It's the whole idea that you are from the Middle East crossing the border. You got a big price tag on you. I said, no. Nothing happened. I went down, and in fact, the custom border guy, he knew from my passport I was born in Lebanon. He said, do you speak Arabic? I said, I do. He said, would you like to have an interpreter job with us?
Oh, wow.
Crossing the border. And I thought, yeah, you know what? It's a good idea, but not now. I got a business to do now.
Yeah. Well, I get people asking, oh, well, I mean, how was it being a woman in the Middle East? It must have been terrible. You must have had to walk 3 meters behind the guys. And I'm like, well, actually, no. No, I never had that experience. I mean, okay, I was in jobs which have status, and so that does adjust how people treat you a little bit. But, and here I'll be controversial again. I have had less problems. I had less problems in the Middle East with people being sexist and treating me differently because I was female than I've had in Australia.
Oh, wow. Wow. That's a big statement.
Yeah.
It's sad to hear that. It's sad to hear that. The countries that you're supposed to have different opinions about how people treat each other. Here you go.
I don't want to say, like, I'm not like claiming I have been through any particular hardship, but if you kind of line them up and you're expecting drastic difference, I'd be like, well, no, not really.
Not really, yeah. It's the unknown that people are worried about.
Yeah.
Because they don't know, and they consume content from the usual channels or from the usual content sources, which they tend to exaggerate for clickbaits and a bunch of other things.
I get so crazy when I go online, and I try and read widely, so I tend to get conflicting stuff coming through my social media, and you get onto the comment sections of some of the posts that are out there at the moment, and the polarization of views between the comments on one post and the comments on the other. There are people trolling from both points of view, and I'm like, how is this even possible?
It's crazy because they tend to. I don't know. It's a long economy of peddling wrong information and people getting paid for it. There's an economy built for that, and I don't know why is it the way it is. I guess that's the nature of there are some countries that try and put some controls in place.
Yeah.
I don't know how successful they would be. Now, tell me, why mid-sized companies specifically? You dedicated your career to help mid-sized companies, or your current career to help mid-sized companies. What does this segment get it right and not or wrong compared to enterprise or startups for that case?
Well, look, I mean, I guess we've really chosen, my team and I have chosen to focus on the mid-market because we figure that really large companies should probably be able to do it themselves, and they will have resource to create a team and hire internally. And the very small end of the market, while we can and do provide help through education and so forth, before a company hits a certain size, it's really quite challenging for them to expand overseas. And so while we won't turn people away, we also don't want to set people up with false hope and say, hey, this is going to be a picnic, because we know from experience that you can blow up hundreds of thousands of dollars in a year getting into the market and getting set up. And you spend that before you make any revenue, and certainly before you turn a profit. And so we want to work with companies where we can be sure that they're going to succeed. We don't want to promise people things that we know can't easily be made true and then have them be disappointed. So we prefer to focus on companies that turn over at least several $1 million, up to about $100 million and work with those, because we know that they need help. They might not have the resource to actually hire a team in full time, but we can work with them to do all the things that need doing on a fractional basis. We can supply a team of people that do only this kind of work, and they can devote part of the time to that project. They can stand up the international division within the company. They can get the strategy going and the operations. And then when it's built and it's stable, we're sort of like Mary Poppins. You know, we leave, and we can then help them recruit somebody in to fill the role and keep it stable. So that's really why. What do mid-sized companies get right compared to others? Look, I don't think there's a particular set of things. I think similar mistakes get made across all sizes of companies. You know, there are things like product market fit, like, you know, cultural difference. I mean, you would think companies that are massively well-resourced, like Starbucks or Walmart or Taco Bell or our Australian hardware chain, Bunnings, which is pretty big, would be able to get it right. But all those companies that I've mentioned have had failed attempts at international expansion because they assumed that they knew enough. You know, they were highly successful at home and in other markets, and then they assumed in particular markets that they could just copy paste what had been done elsewhere. And of course, it didn't work out. And I think that is a mistake that is common across all sizes of business, particularly if you've had a measure of success. You know, it can make you a little bit complacent or a little bit arrogant, and you tend to, you know, you start believing,
of course,
drinking your own Kool-Aid and thinking, well, I know how this works. Like, look how well we did. So I think that's a very common mistake.
Yeah. Yeah, I do believe what you're talking about here, what you're discussing with us, Cynthia, has a lot of merits. In fact, anecdotally, on our side here in Canada, we had several experiments from US big chains trying to move into Canada. They come in, they put the infrastructure in place, billions of dollars spent. They hire CEOs, they put the infrastructure in place, building, people, material, etc. And one in particular called Target. It's a big, famous chain in the US. Oh, you know them?
Yeah, we have them as here in Australia.
Oh, you do have them in Australia too, huh? So they came to Canada. They hired a local CEO to run the company in Canada, and didn't even last 2-3 years, maybe. And they folded the company and they left. Billions of dollars got wasted. You're right. There is this sense of saying, you know, a 20,000 employee company or whatever the number of employees you have, we're a big company. We have a lot of skills, a lot of expertise. We know how to put this thing together. Don't worry about it. We don't need anybody telling us differently. In fact, we see this all the time, especially in the language industry, when people go down that road of thinking, it comes back biting them, kind of thing. So either they make a big mistake that costs them, or they do false launch, if you will, in market, and then you end up with a big trouble.
I mean, you will probably know the Starbucks example, or you might not. The Starbucks example in Australia, you know, Starbucks had already expanded all around the world when they came here. And they went, oh, well, you know, Australia's kind of like the States. Everybody speaks English, XYZ. We'll just launch. And they opened about more than 100 stores. But they didn't actually do any research into the fact, you know, of how the coffee culture works here. And it's very specific. So post World War II, we had a giant wave of Greek and Italian immigration. And that wave brought all this amazing coffee and this culture of independent coffee shops where you know the barista and you go and you get your coffee. And suddenly, you know, here comes Starbucks with their jumbo size coffee and their venti this and their whatever. And
nobody wants to buy it.
Nobody wanted it. I mean, for a start, they just couldn't bear the taste of the coffee. They're like, this coffee is terrible. And they didn't like the impersonal service and the kind of fast food convenience store kind of feeling. Starbucks had to close 80 of its 107 stores.
Wow. That's a bad experiment.
It did put some back. So, I mean, it rejigged some stuff and it operates here now, but it's not. People who like coffee in this market are not rushing out saying, I need Starbucks.
You're right. I mean, if they're not in love with it, it's not like they didn't grow up with it, and it's sort of strange to the culture, strange to the demographics that they're trying to serve.
But, you know, Caribou Coffee, which we don't have down here, which is a Canadian brand, it would work better here than Starbucks would. because Canada
Sorry, which type of coffee you mentioned?
Caribou.
Oh, Caribou coffee. Yeah, that's right.
We don't have it here, but we probably should. Like, if we're going to have another coffee chain, that would not be a bad one to have.
Yep. No, tell me a little bit about your company, Dearin Associates. You mentioned several type of way you engage with customers. Is there anything else other than market research or local research that you do to prepare your customers to enter those markets? Is there any other service you provide?
Yeah. So look, we are a boutique firm. We're like, a big firm, but miniaturized. And so we really try to help companies that want to launch internationally through that whole process. So we do strategy and planning, because we know that understanding what you're trying to achieve before you get started is very, very important. We provide that analysis and intel piece. We do it for Australia, but we also provide it for other markets. So we do comparative analysis and we do deep dive analysis on single markets. We do pricing support, because that's an area where a lot of people make mistakes because they just have the domestic price and then they stick a margin on the top and they just don't think about all the variables that come into play, like freight and insurance, foreign exchange, tariffs in the current environment, extra shipping costs in the current environment. And so some people start selling, and when we look into it, we realize the margins are too small, or they're actually going to make a loss on every sale. So that's very, very important to get that right. We do channel partner support, so we help companies to source distributors. One of our favorite clients we have put into 22 markets around the world over the last 2 years, and that's a first aid brand called Survival. I'm sure Mike Tyrrell, who's the CEO, won't mind me saying that, because he's very proud of what they've been able to do. So, we've helped him with that journey, providing that distribution support. We do growth services. So, if a company is coming to the Australian market and wants to test how they're going to grow and isn't ready to stand up a whole sales team, we can provide fractional support on that. And we also provide marketing support so that a company can customize their messaging.
So now we have your not being recorded. Why is that?
And it says free up space.
Take a look at what's going on your computer. I think we did the same thing last time, 22 minutes, and you ran out of space. I'm enjoying this conversation so much. I'm probably going to ship you a computer there, Cynthia.
If you drop too early, it says you're uploading your recording, a minute left. I just don't understand why it keeps running out.
Zero uploaded. Oh, wow. You're mine zero uploaded.
3. It says uploading your recording. Now it says 4%.
Yeah, it's starting to upload now.
5, but it was telling me like 70% previously as we're chatting.
Oh, I see. So it sort of locked the upload and then it opened it?
Well, as I can see, that it was saying it was 70% uploaded as we're chatting.
Okay.
But now when I look here, I can see it says 11% uploading.
Yeah, that's right. So it's getting better.
Slowly uploading as we go.
This is what's good about these live conversation, guys. To the audience, you're experiencing here what I experience, and I don't necessarily broadcast on LinkedIn, but today I wanted to show you how a podcast gets recorded. I want to make sure that you guys see this. Sometimes it happens.
I'm worried if I clear my cache, it might cut us off.
Well, I don't know. It seems to be uploading. So if it's uploading, that means it started to record again. I'm assuming it gets freeing up the space.
Okay. Well, otherwise I can try and uncache everything.
Well, maybe uncache everything. Maybe. I don't know. I don't know how that works on your side, but I do feel like right now you're at 29% uploaded and it's moving fast. So you have a good internet.
Yeah. Internet's actually not bad. It's, fiber optic cable.
There you go.
Just trying to do, it says how to free up space. It's trying to tell me, how is it that I free up this space? Hang on a second. Let me see if I can go to our history and clear everything. But I do clear it quite often. Wait a second. Delete browsing data. Delete all the data for all time. Let's see if I hope it doesn't cut you off.
No, I don't think so. We're connected now.
So is it, I wonder if it's still going to go live even if we haven't done that. So it's trying to clear it now. But see, cached images and files are less than a meg. So
Yeah,
that's really,
I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's space or something else going on the computer. I'm not sure. If I was here, I would be doing the testing, but I don't know. I don't know what to do with this remotely.
you're like far away on the other side of the world.
On the other side of the world in Canada, Australia. I'm not sure how that works.
So do
Well,
we
I mean,
think
for any reason, let's continue the conversation. And you know what? We may have to become a lot more closer as friends now if we have to do this third time. But
we could do this all the time. We could just record them live continuously.
yeah, we'll just call it the Robin and Cynthia sort of update. We do it like on a weekly basis or something.
Not a terrible idea.
I love the idea. Are you kidding?
We could do the view from the north.
That's right. That's right. Now, for the audience, you also run a podcast, and podcasting has taken off now. I think everybody wants to be in the podcasting world. Yeah. And for many reasons. A, to promote their business. B, to perhaps tell a story, and people have various reasons to put the word out. And the way to do podcasting, it's not that complicated. Now anybody can put a podcast together. But your podcast is called Business Beyond Border Podcast.
Yes.
What made you want to build a media arm for your company, for your advisory work?
Well, look, we work in a really niche space, right? And so if we don't do that, nobody will ever know we exist. So it doesn't matter how good our services are if nobody knows about them.
Yeah.
It's going to be very difficult to supply them to people. So I mean, I work on the basis that, especially in professional services, people are buying you, right?
Yeah.
So people buy people. People want to know, like, and trust you. If there's a universe of people providing, I mean, okay, it's niche, but there are also other people in other places who do similar things. So I really have done it because I wanted to stand out, and I wanted to be able to share some of what we do with people so they can make up their own minds about us before we start to work together. And also, there is so much great stuff that you can share with people. I mean, I'm naturally pretty curious. And so, I get questions in my mind about, well, how does this work? Or what's the impact of that thing? And I like to go away and research it. And then having researched it, I mean, it's pretty boring if you just keep it to yourself. So
correct. Absolutely. You got to share all that stuff with people.
And also, I have just met some such, you meet fascinating people when you podcast.
Oh, 100%. With this recording, hopefully it works. 230 podcasts now. So met a lot of good people along the journey. No, you mentioned it briefly earlier, and I think I'd love to address that. Your core thesis, and that's for the audience, Cynthia's core thesis is that globalization is not retreating, is reshaping. Based on that, a lot of people are reading the headlines. Obviously, we all, everybody have different takes on the headlines. Obviously, depends on which side of the coin you're on. Tariffs, globalizations. Yeah. Now, there's something called friend shoring. I don't know. That's the new one. I think I was doing the research before we did this one. I think in friend shoring makes sense, but I don't know what that is. And thinking the world is closing back up, but you disagree. Can you make the case?
Yeah, I mean, I think we are seeing an end to the globalization that we saw from the 90s onwards. So, there's Francis Fukuyama end of history thing, which I don't think was ever 100% accurate anyway, is definitely over. So we went, from the end of the Second World War through this period of accelerating globalization and things converging and converging and converging. And I think the system really got to a point where it was so interconnected that things that had been assets really became liabilities. Mm-hmm. In Australia, for example, companies started to close manufacturing here because they could produce things more cheaply in other parts of the world, notably China. And so, I mean, our manufacturing industry has basically, well, not entirely disappeared, but it's really drastically reduced in size. And everything was about just in time and the cheapest cost. And we've realized that when you concentrate, all your resources in one place and then something goes wrong with that relationship, suddenly you're at risk. So what it's done is it's enabled people or encouraged people not to have this diversified approach. it's encouraged people to put their eggs in one basket, thinking, oh, well, nothing will ever go wrong. I mean, you see this, what's happening in the Middle East at the moment with the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. It's always been there. It's always been a risk. But people have sort of been living in this fantasy world where they're thinking, oh, this will never happen. Of course, it will never close. I mean, to the point that Australia, while it's supposed to hold 90 days of fuel supplies under international energy security agreements, held 5 days of supply. Thankfully, we got it up to about 30 days. But it was all based on, oh, well, that's not, it's a kind of a black swan event, will probably never happen. Similarly, with the Australian relationship with China, and don't get me wrong, I think it's great that we trade with China. I think it's great that we sell to each other, but so much focus was placed there that then when things became a little strained during the COVID pandemic and China started to put sanctions on Australia and highly tariff our goods, that created a lot of problems for companies relying on supplies from China or selling to China. And it's just become apparent that you can't put all your eggs in one basket. You have to diversify. And so this is a very long way of saying, I don't think international trade is over, but the shape of it is changing.
Yeah.
We're seeing it possibly become more regional. I think there is this move towards a lot of middle power collaboration. And I think what's happening in the international trade landscape cannot be divorced from what's happening in the international political landscape.
They're all connected, right? So they're all interconnected.
Yeah, and they used to be separate. I mean, people used to be able to say, well, we're having some political disagreements, but trade is trade, business is business, and politics is politics. I think that's much less the case now than it used to be. I mean, and the Iran energy crisis is the perfect example because it's being driven by politics, but the major impact is really being felt in
everywhere.
The business landscape. Yeah, and just economically everywhere around the world, right? So the things, you can see how this extreme convergence has driven this interdependence between politics and trade.
You actually wrote recently about the UAE leaving OPEC as a signal that the old model of coordinated control is fracturing, which is true. I mean, we had over, post Second World War, there was several institutions that sort of sprouted from the experiences that we had in two consecutive World War, which cost a lot of damage, life, etc. And so we had like the UN and, various organizations under that umbrella. We have OPEC now. We've got a bunch of things around the world in a coordinated fashion. But what you make a point of is that coordinated control is fracturing. I think, from what I just read in the media and I talk to people all the time, it sounds like it is true, but you can expand on that one.
Yeah, I mean, look, again, I think we're just seeing a shifting of relationships and priorities. So, OPEC has been around for 50 plus years, and it's expanded. There were 7 original members. Now I think it's up to about 15. And it was created to, I guess, advantage all of the producers of oil and keep some stability in oil prices and kind of manage the economic impact of fluctuating oil prices. And that was all working reasonably well until we hit this current patch of turbulence. I mean, suddenly you've got, Iran sitting inside OPEC, and it's sitting inside OPEC alongside Saudi Arabia and the UAE, and it's been firing rockets at them. And suddenly it's very difficult to hold this polite and respectful conversation about oil prices when, people are firing projectiles at each other. Russia's in there somewhere too. And the UAE and Saudi were very, very close for a long time, and worked together. But over the last 10 years, their interests have started to diverge as well. And Saudi has always been seen as the kind of older brother in the partnership. And I think, in the UAE, that became less popular, if you like, as an approach. And the UAE started to say, well, we want to set our own agenda. They've basically said, well, we can see that the end of oil is coming. So rather than eking out our oil supply as long as possible and having the price dictated, we want to pump as much oil as we can now, and we want to be free to set our own price. And whenever they were inside OPEC, they couldn't do that. And so this is, again, countries responding to the current political dynamic and thinking about, well, what is going to be best for us and the people in our country? And so it's driving these behaviors that we haven't seen in our lifetime. Yeah. I mean, I think prior to this, we've been living through this long period of relative stability. And so we've all come to expect that that's normal. But most of history is not like that. And I think we're probably going back into what history has generally been like.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And one of the things, like when you mention OPEC, which is hard to ignore, is there are countries that they're not part of OPEC and they're selling on their own, basically, outside of that umbrella.
Yeah.
And the number of those countries is not, it's increasing, obviously, because, they want to create their own controls. They want to have their own control over what they sell and what they produce, etc.
Yeah.
So which also contribute, I'm assuming, to what the UAE is doing. Specifically, like in your argument, which I really truly appreciate, is that whole relationship dynamic with Iran, who is sending messages via projectile at their neighbors. And it just doesn't, the what they call projectile diplomacy, is that how they call it now? It doesn't really make a good economic foundation to solve business problems. Let's put it this way.
No, I think it's where, we are entering, I think we're in it, but we're basically going further into this period of volatility. Correct. As the dynamic shift. And also, look, not everybody who's playing the international business and political game is operating off the same set of values. And that's tricky because, you have major powers like the States and China that have quite different views of the world clashing. And you've even got the United States and Europe, which have been so close for so long, sort of starting to diverge on quite a few issues. And so that, that takes away some of that stability that we've all gotten used to.
Correct. Let's move a little bit and talk a little bit about the upcoming book. I don't know what stage is it in. The Global Standard. Can you give us a bit of a preview of what it is and when it will be launched?
Yes. I can tell you probably more about what's in it than when it would be launched. I was hoping that it would be launched now, but sometimes life gets in the way, and it's partially written, but there are still a few things that I want to tidy up on it, even in response to what's happening in the world. Things are moving pretty quickly, and so the more things evolve, the more you get it. You're sort of tempted to tweak stuff. But really, this book is about the fact that international business is still incredibly relevant and incredibly important in the current environment. I mean, my argument is really that international business is a good thing, and it can transform people's lives for the better, not just the people who sell the things, but also the people who receive the goods and services that are produced. In markets like Australia and markets like New Zealand, we invent incredible stuff, but we're small. And so if inventors and creators are always stuck in the home market, nobody's going to get the benefit of these incredible technologies that they come up with, or not nobody, but very few people. Whereas where they can get out onto the global stage, that's going to provide a massive opportunity for them to do good for themselves, for their community, but also, and really importantly, for the people who they are serving. And so that is part of the argument of the book. And then the potentially even more important part of the argument is that how you do international business really matters. Because the world is so interconnected, despite the changes I've mentioned, what we do in a company in Canada or Australia can now impact people's lives in Asia or in Africa or in Mexico.
Yep, 100%. It's got a downstream effect or upstream effect, depends on where you are.
Right. And if you can't see that, and if you're not aware of that, you can go on blithely just acting as you're acting, having no appreciation of the consequence of your actions. And so this is really a book about getting leadership, teams and companies and boards to think about what they're trying to do with their international business, how they're going to do it, how they're going to do it responsibly, how they're going to do it so that everybody wins, rather than having this zero-sum game where some people make a lot of money and other people pay for that with their lives and their communities and the environments that they live in.
No, you called it a manifesto, and it's sort of declaration of sort. Can you expand on the manifesto declaration thing, and who are you declaring it to?
Well, look, I think to everybody who's involved in international business. And this is probably especially true for...
you know what? You're absolutely correct. Even if I'm buying coffee from Starbucks, that coffee is sourced somewhere else. It's not sourced in Canada or United States.
Well, look, it's probably, especially for people who are getting into that top end of the mid-market and larger business.
Yeah.
Because this is really where the rubber starts to hit the road. Now, okay, in Australia, in Canada, in the United States, you have modern slavery obligations, you have environmental obligations. So you're supposed to play by those rules, but it's not equally applied everywhere, right? And there are plenty of places where those things are kind of taken as suggestions, but not necessarily applied. And so my argument is that this shouldn't just be pure capitalism. This should be thinking about, well, what's my responsibility as I run this international business to everybody who is involved?
Because you say, you like global companies to focus on integrity. I think that's what one of the statements in your book. Now, one of the things that when we talk about this one, it's almost there's two sides for this conversation.
Yeah,
you've got companies that they exist from certain countries like Canada, Western countries, that they are under laws, policies, obligations, etc. So they're behaving in a certain way, and then they go to operate in different jurisdictions. Yeah, they can bring these things with them, but I do, and I realize things have changed, and I've got to do this, put this anecdote out there. There was a conversation one time with one of my long-term customers, is one of the largest hardware manufacturer here in Canada, no longer exists, no longer around, and they were telling me that they're moving their manufacturing efforts, Cynthia, to China.
Yeah.
And I said, "Oh, you're moving to China? So what does that mean?" So, the whole story about producing at a lesser cost, etc. So I said, "Fine." Excuse me. So a few weeks gone by, and the people I'm dealing with, they went to China, came back. And they were telling me the story how they sat down with the government representatives or whoever represent the government at that point, and they were telling them, "Hey, we're just telling you up front, we are going to need a copy of all your designs, all your specs.
Oh yeah,
we want to take a copy of that." So, and the individual that I was talking to, I said, "So what did you guys say?" And the answer was, "Okay, we know that, and then we go back and design something better." Now, easier said than done. And the concept sounds good, but they weren't able to, and that company went under. So that entire conversation around intellectual property right, how do you view that?
Well, I think and this is where it comes back to values. And, as I'm saying, some of the economies that you can expand to are not always working on the same set of values, whether it's about care for workers or the environment or approaches to intellectual property. So, you can be a complete relativist and say, oh, well, all values are equal. There are no values that are better than any others. But I think there is a set of values which is better than other sets of values, and it includes not stealing other people's intellectual property, right? So, I think it's incumbent on everybody who is in that international business game to think about, well, what is fair and what is right. Look, you can go to the opposite ends of the spectrum on this. I think protection for intellectual property in China is better than it was, but it's such a vast country that it's going to be very difficult to implement, say, to a Canadian or an Australian standard across the board. And then you've got Europe at the other end of the spectrum, which some people would argue overregulates, right? So look, it's tricky. I think you've got to kind of work it through. You have to think about what's right, but also if you're a company expanding, you've got to be pragmatic. Are you willing to risk your IP? Can you actually design something better? And if you can't, and you don't trust the people that you're working with, well, then don't work with them. Go and find people that you can trust to work.
And that's part of the assessment that you provide to your customers, I'm assuming. That's the sort of the risk assessment or risk exposure that you probably advise on?
Yeah, I mean, I would have a senior advisor go to market with a client if the client wanted it to. And they would go together to the factory where things were being produced, and they'd sit down and spend 3 days with the factory owner, and they would try and take the measure of that person. They'd look at everything from what the person wore to what handbag they carried to what car they drove to how the people in their team were treated to what the facility looked like. They would go and due diligence that person and find out, well, are these people actually people that we want to work with? Are these people we can trust? Are these people who we think are going to do the right thing?
Now, Cynthia, correct me if I'm wrong, but I've heard a couple of practices which sort of like make me wonder sometimes. I heard about a German automobile manufacturer, I won't name any names, operating or building cars, let's say in Mexico, for instance. And they have a practice in terms of hiring the people that works for them, where it says from the supervisor, floor supervisor, manager, category manager, all the way up, those are Germans, or people that they come from their own company abroad and they bring them over. Meanwhile, the low-level labor is local. Have you seen this practice? Is it still around, or the people have got rid of that?
No, look, I think again, it depends, right? But I think even where you have that, I mean, if you take it to the sort of top end of the scale, I don't know if you've read it, but there's a book about Apple in China, and it talks in depth about Apple's relationship with Foxconn and how they started with manufacturing that was globally distributed. And over time, it's concentrated and concentrated and concentrated until a vast, probably the vast majority of the components that go into any Apple product are designed in Cupertino, but are actually manufactured in different places in China. And that has done a couple of things, because over 25 years or so, all the know-how about the manufacturing has transferred itself to China. And so they've created this entire enormous industry in China, which has the expertise to manufacture Apple products. And that expertise is now gone out of the United States and a bunch of other economies. And so in that scenario,
basically bringing it back to US is going to be very tough now.
They can never bring it back. So now inextricably linked pretty much forever, because they can't do it for the same cost anyway. And that expertise is built. And so what you will now see is you'll get somebody else who's smart who will take all that expertise and they'll start their own brand. So, I mean, what goes around comes around. I'm sure there are places where it's all senior people from abroad and low-level people, who are local. But I think if you go on doing that long enough, especially in the manufacturing space, you can't help but have the knowledge transfer. And so that can be great for people in the local economy, and it can equally be kind of disadvantageous for the foreign company that's come in. And if in the Apple scenario, I mean, Apple has invested more money in China than the United States or any of the global aid bodies. Like, it's outstripped it by hundreds and hundreds of times. So, I can't remember who wrote that book. I should find out who wrote it, but it's called Apple in China. If you want an example of that.
Apple in China, I'm going to get it. No, for the audience, Apple in China is a good book. Good recommendation by Cynthia. So from my perspective, and I wanted to ask you, what is the biggest strategic mistake you see mid-sized companies make when they decide to enter new international markets? And what do you tell them to stop doing? Stop underestimating, stop.
We could do a whole podcast on mistakes.
I'm sure you've seen some good examples of what not to do.
Week in, week out. I mean, look, I think the market selection piece is one that pops up time and time and time again. I mean, practically every week I speak to a company that's been selling opportunistically into another number of markets, and they've just got drawn in. And each market has different requirements and different conditions. And so they're making not great progress in any of the markets, but they're spread in about 5 different directions. So I think split focus is a giant mistake. And I am constantly saying, can we please laser focus? Can we make a list of things we are not going to focus on? Because when you narrow the focus, suddenly you get clarity. So I'm always encouraging clients as a first step to really do or commission work to understand which are the markets that have got potential for us, but also where should we focus first? Because the best market long term for a company may well not be the best market for them in the short term because they're not experienced enough. They need to learn to walk before they can run. So I think that is a mistake. I think not having any proper strategy is also a massive mistake. As I said, a lot of companies do this opportunistically, and then they're going to expand somewhere. And when you ask them, well, what are you actually trying to achieve? What's the ideal scenario in 3 years? How does it look? They can't really articulate it for you because they haven't sat down and gone through that process. It hasn't been socialized with the leadership team. There's no kind of common shared vision and direction. So I think that is really key. Ignoring the pricing is a giant mistake. I did mention that one before. It happens all the time. Assuming
affordability, right? It dives into affordability too in those markets.
Yeah, well, I mean, you have to be able to sell competitively, but also profitably.
Correct.
People don't articulate.
Nobody's a charity organization, right? You're not doing whatever you're doing for philanthropy.
No, that's exactly right. I think often, another mistake is people don't define their offer for the market. They don't adjust the messaging and the marketing. I mean, you will know about this in the localization industry. People just run it through Google Translate and think, oh, that will do. Yeah. And it doesn't do very well at all. So I think that's crucial to get right. I mean, as I said, we could be here all day. There are 3,000 mistakes that you can make, unfortunately, and any one of them can pretty much bring you unstuck.
I was going to ask you this probably earlier, but, it sort of dawned on me, and I probably should ask you this question. When we talk about expansion, is that still a thing now? The reason I asked the question, is expansion still a thing, is because everywhere I look around, there's a few conversations that they're sort of overshadowing this expansion conversation. One is, expansion is bad for the environment. Business growth is not always has to be a hockey stick. You should probably learn to be flat. Those are subliminal messages that people are getting from things like net zero policies and a bunch of other things.
Yeah.
Expansion is still a thing.
Well, I'm still getting inquiries and projects from companies that want to expand, weekly. So I assume that it is. I mean, look, people have to continue to make a living, right? And people still want to consume things. People still want cars and clothes and concrete and goods transported from A to B and supplies in hotels. I mean, the world doesn't stop turning just because we're trying to achieve net zero. And again, these are all these fundamental conversations where people line up on either side of them. And I think that a lot of the conversations, the truth is often somewhere in between. I mean, we like to categorize into it's black, it's white, but in the vast majority of these debates, it's not black or white. It's some shade of gray.
Yeah, there is no black and white. You're absolutely correct. One of the things that people struggle with is pragmatism and ethics when they're putting things into, because they push in the opposite direction, right? You want to be pragmatic, but you want to get stuck to your ethics, as we were talking earlier. Yeah. In an emerging market, how do you navigate that with your clients?
Well, look, I think you have to start as a company to say, what do we stand for? What are our values? And I think the values of the company have to be the guiding North Star. I mean, speaking for our company, we have our company values, and we're not going to do things that contravene that. We say that we focus on integrity, excellence, respect, and fun. And if opportunities come up to act in ways that don't correspond, well, we look at it and go, well, that's not what we stand for.
Yeah.
So if we're going to be asked to do something that we think is wrong, we're not going to do it. But I think it's a judgment call. Is that going to mean that sometimes you make less money? Yeah, absolutely it is. But what is most important? The cash?
Yeah.
Or doing the right thing? I mean, I think it's pretty straightforward as an idea, but I know in practice, people can find it difficult to apply because, of course, everybody would always like more money.
Correct. And it's going to impact the bottom line in a lot of cases. So now let's talk about payment, the picture of 10 years from now for companies who got this right, the expansion right, versus the ones they didn't. What does each one of them look like? Maybe they don't want to expand; they just want to stay flat. I have a thing here on the channel. I used it last week. I'm not sure how happy people were or not happy with it. I said evolve or dissolve, one or the other. But I don't know if people thought, Robin, you're crazy. But there's some truth to that. To be honest with you, there's a couple of things going on right now. There's the expansion. You got to continue growing, and that's you're being pushed by your board of directors, your shareholders, etc.
Yeah.
And there's also another set of companies where they're single owned or individual owned or family owned, whatever you want to call it, where they're happy with life the way it is. And there's the third factor where there are a bunch of acquirers, private equity firms, banks, etc. They're looking for those owners that they're tired. They just don't want to take their companies to the next level.
Yeah.
And it's a buyer's market now. So people are really either, if they decide, hey, I'm not doing this whole 10 years from now, I'm going to run ragged for another 10 years to grow this company. So they're deciding to get rid of it. So there's some truth to evolve or dissolve one of the What's your take?
Look, I think it's sort of evolve or die, personally, because you look at companies.
Here's the pragmatic Cynthia. Just take a month.
Well, I mean, Nokia and
You're
Kodak.
absolutely correct, though. You're absolutely right.
Nokia and Kodak, wildly successful, couldn't evolve.
Nope.
And they folded because they just kept on doing the same old thing. I mean, that trend is going to continue.
Oh, Nortel, BlackBerry. I mean, you count them. I mean, those are big brands. They're gone.
Yeah. But I mean, even companies, the internet, technology, improved shipping, apart from the last few months, and AI have made it possible for people in markets that are less well-resourced to now compete with high-cost evolved markets like Canada, the States, Australia, Europe, in ways that were not possible before. And so, not for hairdressers, not for mechanics, not for people who mow the lawn, but in a lot of spaces, the people in low-cost markets who are bright and educated and now have access to all the same tools, they are coming for your lunch because they can create the same stuff at a lower cost base.
100%.
And so if you don't have an international footprint and you're just operating in your own market,
you're not going to be able to take advantage of those skills.
Yeah, and you don't see the competition. So, I mean, I can run a company in Australia and we can use AI and people in other markets, and we can provide the same service on a lower cost base. And if there's another company up the road that is employing 10 staff on full-time, full-strength wages and carrying the overhead of big offices and so forth, and they're insulated from the understanding of the world, they're going to most likely, unless they charge a great deal more, operate on thinner margins. And over time, that's not a good thing. That puts their business in a very precarious position because there are all these other people providing the same quality product and it costs far less and it's just as good. So, I mean, I think this international aspect is becoming more and more important, especially for companies in developed markets, because you've got to find ways to compete. You've got to find ways to be able to, produce things competitively.
100%. Somebody says a long time ago, your competition is not next door; it's across the ocean. Yeah, and that's more true today than it ever was.
Absolutely.
Because you can build a company, as you said, anywhere else and act and behave as you were local. Like I've seen companies, I look at their website, they look Canadian, they have a phone number here, their address is here on the website, the physical address, that's the PO box apparently. And then when you look into it, there is nobody in Canada. These employees are somewhere else.
Or even, I know people who run businesses and they charge, Canadian or Australian prices, but they live in Bali in Indonesia. And so their cost base is 1/10 of what it would be if they lived, in one of the countries that we're sitting in today. And so they can charge reasonable prices, but essentially they're multimillionaires in that economy because their cost base is almost nothing whatsoever.
Correct. You're absolutely correct. What's next for you, Cynthia? What do you
What's
see
next
your
for
company
me?
going in the next little while?
Well,
Do you
we're
like what you do? Do you want to continue, or are you? What's your story?
I mean, sometimes I'd say it depends what day you ask me. You have some weeks where you're like, gosh, that was a bit rough. But no, on the whole, look, it's so interesting. I'm never bored. There's always something new coming. There's always something new to learn about. There are always really interesting new people to meet and new projects to do, and very important for me, new places to go. So I find it very diverse and very exciting. But I mean, we are continuing to scale up. And really what I want to do is to increase our reach internationally and to put more partners into our team from around the world so that we can, cover more parts of the globe with what we do. And so we can be working with clients to provide their amazing goods and services to the world in a way that is good for everybody. If somebody came along and said, hey, we want to buy you out, we'll pay you a fortune, would I take it? It really depends on the company. Do you know what I mean? I would not want to.
I thought you were going to say it depends on the fortune.
Well, it does, but I mean, I would not want to sell the brand to a company that did not align with what we stand for. Do you know what I mean?
Correct.
I think that
Cultural alignment.
I think it would be wrong. I think it would be wrong for the team. But no, I like what I do. I want to continue to grow what we do. I want to continue to be able to serve people and to really help people. I mean, it gives me a lot of satisfaction when we can stand up somebody's business in a bunch of markets and we can make them successful, and we can also contribute to the amazing contribution that they make. So, I mentioned our client that provides first aid kits. Those first aid kits are not about like a pack of stuff. I mean, they are, but really they are about buying time. If you get bitten by a venomous snake or spider or bitten by a shark, all of which happen down here, that kit can be the difference between you making it or not. So when we see that going into 22 markets around the world, we're like, this is good. We are helping to make sure that people everywhere are prepared in case there's a disaster or an emergency.
Correct.
So just that for the time being.
Oh, absolutely. Maybe, based on the frequency of you and I talking to each other, maybe we'll end up working together. I don't know.
You never know, right?
maybe my next first order of business is perhaps fixing the computer.
Well, I think I need to maybe I'll upgrade it. It is an iPad. It's a good computer.
It's all good. I don't know. Maybe some small glitch somewhere. No, look, that's all the questions I have. What do you think so far from the first conversation to the second conversation? I think there was a bit of an upgrade here.
Yeah, I think so. Well, we probably know each other a bit better, right? So we're less concerned about it.
What do they say, Cynthia? Third time is a charm? Is that what they say?
Yeah, well, we can do it again, Robin. I'll let you know. I might come up to the States in the next few months. So if I do that, I'll hop over the border.
Maybe we'll face-to-face conversation at some point. No, I really want to thank you so much for joining me again, Cynthia. I really appreciate it. And I hope you come back again. And hopefully this recording ends up okay. And if it isn't, it'll be my chance to see you again. I'm going to keep doing this until we get it right.
I'm going to make sure that even when we close everything, I'm going to leave everything open to give it the best chance of actually uploading. I think that could be the secret.
I really appreciate it. And from me and Cynthia, I want to thank the audience for joining us on this journey on the live broadcast. I see a few people online. Thanks for being online with me and listening to this conversation with me and Cynthia Dearin. And I just also want to thank you guys for watching the episode on YouTube and listening to us on the audio channels. I really appreciate your support. And if you're reading the blog, thanks for reading the blog as well, where we summarize all these conversations into smaller pieces of content. And the blog post is called robinayoub.blog. And I will see you guys at the next episode. This is Robin Ayoub and Cynthia Dearin signing off. Bye, everybody.